Readiness. What does readiness mean to you? How about you? Readiness is your ability to do what you need to do, when you need to do it, and how you need to do it. Readiness isn't only about you. Readiness is your ability to work with other people in very unpredictable situations. Readiness requires your ability to communicate, coordinate, and connect with those that you work with. Why is readiness important to our joint warfighters? Because nobody goes to war alone. We're going to do some role-playing today. Are you ready? You are the best football player in the nation. You're on your way to the Super Bowl. But when you arrive, you don't see a football field. You don't see any helmets. You don't see any pads. What you see is a basketball court. Good news, there's a football there. You also see two other groups of people who are incredibly confused. And then you hear, team, huddle up. 3 different groups of people form 3 different huddles. And then you hear again, I said team, huddle up. Lots of chaos, lots of confusion. You don't know what's going on. And then, eventually, one big group of people form a team together. You are the best at what you do. We have the best basketball, lacrosse, and football teams here today. You are each on your way to your national championships. But I'm here to tell you that those were canceled. And you no longer play that sport. You now play la boot ball. Everybody's confused. They came here to win today. What are they going to do? You have to get together with your team. You have to communicate, coordinate, and connect in order to get the job done. And it gets better. It's not only a national championship, it's now a world championship. You're going up against the best la boot ball team in the world. And guess what? They've known about the sport for 6 months. They've been rehearsing, they've been training, they've been practicing. They know what to do. So if you don't pull it together, you're going to be a national embarrassment. All right, I admit, la boot ball is really weird. I came up with it. It doesn't exist, in case anybody was wondering. Pretty evident what sports my kid likes, as a matter of fact. But big picture here is that we ask people to do things like this every day. We ask our first responders to do this. We ask our military to do this. We ask people to come together in unfamiliar environments when a lot is on the line to perform at their top quality. We've had several instances just in the last month in this nation that remind us how adaptable we have to be to our environments. We have the hurricanes. We have the unfortunate shooting in Las Vegas. We have the wildfires in California. We ask people to come together and perform at their best in uncertain situations. How do people do this? How do they pull it together? This is a human problem. We can't fix this with technology. A ton of money isn't going to fix it either. It's actually being ready to do what we do best. It's training in these stressful environments so that we know how to perform when we're asked to perform. We have the top military in the world. They are very good at what they do. But how do we prepare them for what's unpredictable? All right, now you're an AC-130 gunship pilot. You're deployed in Afghanistan. You receive notification from your Joint Terminal Attack Controller. That's a liaison from the ground to the air that tells you that there's a target that they would like you to drop bombs on, basically. Only when you arrive, you're over an open field. You're not over buildings, as were described to you. So now there's a lot of communication going back and forth. I'm not seeing what you're telling me I should see. Eventually, through a lot of communication, a lot of confusion, they believe that they have identified the building, and they drop their weapons.
Importantly, the investigation concluded that the personnel involved did not know they were striking a medical facility. The intended target was an insurgent-controlled site, which was approximately 400 meters from the Doctors Without Borders Trauma Center. The investigation found that an AC-130 gunship aircrew in support of a U.S. Special Forces element that was supporting an Afghan partner ground force misidentified, and struck the Doctors Without Borders Trauma Center. The investigation determined that all members of both the ground force and the AC-130 aircrew were unaware that the aircraft was firing on a medical facility throughout the engagement. The investigation ultimately concluded that this tragic incident was caused by a combination of human errors compounded by process and equipment failures.
Human error. It's unavoidable. We're human. We don't become programmed with a yes or no statement. We have to make our own decisions. All of us have different levels of experience and knowledge. All of us come to every situation with a different ability to make our decisions. So how do we minimize human error, especially in these life and death situations? We revolutionize readiness. We change the way we train. We expose our military members to environments, stressful environments, prior to actually being in the fog of war. Take, for example, a pilot who deploys. This pilot is probably doing 1 or 2 missions while she's deployed. But when she gets home, there's a whole checklist of things that she's supposed to be current on. When she gets home, all she's doing is spending time gaining that currency again. We call this chasing currency and not proficiency. We're assuming that while she was deployed, she forgot everything she knew prior to going to that location. We're also assuming that she remembers things and forgets things at the same pace as every other pilot. We're not measuring her proficiency, we're measuring her currency. So what if we could train differently? What if we could actually train you to what you don't know rather than what you do know? What if we could predict how long you're going to retain skill and knowledge? All of this is possible. What we know from the literature and what we know from science, and let's face it, common sense, is that in training, one size does not fit all. We know that we all learn differently. We know that we all remember differently. If I said right now that my knowledge set was the same as every other research psychologist in this room, you guys know I'd be wrong. So why do I have to train at the same pace as all the other research psychologists in the room? I shouldn't have to do that. We also know that we can change the way that we train to better prepare people and use our resources a little bit more efficiently. This is not a thought experiment. There's science that proves this can be done. And as a matter of fact, we have demonstrated that proficiency-based training can make people better faster. Say you can become an expert in 5 years instead of 8 years. Think about that cost savings. Think about the readiness. Imagine if we could have a pulse on readiness because we're measuring the effectiveness of you and your performance every single day, regardless to what environment you're in. That's all possible. So in the knowledge management system, this is a demonstration that we've done here at AFRL. We have proven that you can actually predict what the next training event should be in order to gain better proficiency. Here what you see is 4 F-16 simulators. They're high fidelity. What that means is that those simulators replicate the instrumentation that the pilots use in the real world. You start out a scenario by choosing a benchmark scenario, basically to measure a baseline performance metric. During the scenario, you can collect objective metrics. Did you know that right now with all the technology we have, we're not actually collecting live data on anybody? It's all human, subjective data. Now with that though, it's important to remember that we still need those human grades. We still need the situational awareness graded. We still need all of the things that computers cannot grade. But in this system, you can put the subjective and objective metrics together and in real time have a pulse on readiness. You can say what knowledge and skills you are good at and what you need to train more to. And you can turn training on its head and you can train to proficiency rather than currency. All of this can be warehoused through the lifetime of your career. So now we have a true pulse on who's ready to do what and who isn't ready to do what. Imagine if we could track you through your career and say what you're most effective at. That's 100% possible, and we've proven this in this advanced technical demonstration. We can also rate the level of complexity that you should have. We could turn it up a notch, dial it down a notch. All of this, 100% possible. At this point, the machine can then predict, can tell you what your next scenario ought to be. So this is a small example. I'm not saying that the Air Force is ready for proficiency-based training right now, right this second. But what we're doing is we're now expanding this work to look at team of teams, similar to that situation, the AC-130 situation that I talked about earlier today. Now we can pull together a team of teams in a joint environment and actually look and see who's ready to go versus who isn't ready to go. And how are we doing this? We're doing this by bringing our science out to the warfighter. We have test beds around the world that allow us to measure the effectiveness, the baseline level of training. We know right now that our military personnel across joint environments understand that this currency-based system isn't working, and they're modifying it on their own. Let's look at a baseline. Let's see what's going well. Let's see what's not going well. Let's get this objective and subjective data live so that we can have a true pulse on readiness. Last role-playing of the day. It's now 2030, and you're the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force. Our adversaries are smarter and more tech-savvy than ever. You must, in order to support the joint forces, gain air superiority. Because your predecessors invested in proficiency-based training and implemented an operational training infrastructure, you now have a pulse on readiness. You know who to send and where to send them in order to gain air, space, and cyberspace dominance. Thank you.